All right, welcome to 102.3, Managing Shared Libraries. So it's a short little section, but what we need to talk about here is what is a shared library actually for? What is its purpose? And how do we get some of the details about these files in our systems? So we'll look at a few commands to do this and an environment variable. Now, the shared library idea is that a program that gets built might use different system libraries for various functions that the program performs. But there might be all the other software on that system which also can use that same library for those functions, and that's the reason why they're shared. It's a resource made available to multiple different pieces of software, and this is a very convenient way of building software, because if you need to make changes to a library, all of the applications that reference it will be able to reference that new version. These are typically located in /lib or /lib64 for 64-bit systems. Now, when the library is statically linked, this means that all of the pieces that are needed for that program to operate are all in one package, one piece. So we're statically linking means that we're basically embedding the library with the program to run as a single unit. Dynamically linked means that the library is referenced somewhere on that system underneath /lib or /lib64. So there's a little bit more of a complex setup for dynamic linking to a library, but it's fairly easy to deal with. Now, for a particular program, for instance, if you were doing an update or doing a patch, you might have to verify which libraries are referenced by some piece of software. So, if we run our command here, we can see that I can run the, we're going to get a man page here. LDD prints my shared library dependencies. And I'll use the -v option to give us a little bit more information. So I can just specify any executable file like sbin ifconfig, and this shows me all the different libraries which are used by this particular binary. And you'll see I've got lib64 libc.so.6. There's also lib64 ld linux x84.so.2. A few other ones specified here. Actually, these are all referencing the same libc.so.6, at least for that little section. And then libc.so.6 also it references other library files. So it does give me some good detail there. If I run it without the V option, I get a more abbreviated output, but you get the idea. This is very handy, especially when you're doing development work and doing troubleshooting and you're trying to figure out where is there something broken. Maybe I can look at these libraries, figure out where something might be missing. Maybe I don't have the environment variable set correctly, and so on. So these are things to consider. Now, beyond the simple reference of which libraries are required by some binary program, we can also figure out where they're actually located. So there's a dynamic library directory, which we see here at ld.so.conf, and then there's configuration files underneath at ld.so.conf.d. It's kind of a mouthful when you say it like that. So let's go ahead and have a look at those. So I can run the locate command against libc.so.6. And since it's within my search path, the locate command tells me where that is. And if I want to look at a long listing, oops. Having trouble typing. Now I can see where the symbolic link actually points. So this way I can reference We'll talk a little bit more about links later, but this is a way to have pointers to a file that can exist in multiple places. It's very convenient for situations like this where I have a shared library. Now, if I go to the directory, I'm in etc.ld.so.conf.d. This is where all the configuration files are. And I've only got a handful of items here, but I can look at, for instance, my iSCSI config file, and it tells me where the driver is, my Maria database. I've got user lib64 MySQL, so the Maria database, which we'll see later, uses this shared library for MySQL. It's very, very easy to see how this all fits together. Or hopefully it's going to be becoming easier to see how this fits together. Now, as an administrator, sometimes shared libraries are not available when software needs them. So you can use the ldconfig to load or to look at the contents of the cache, and then we can just specify the environment variable of ld library path and in order to point to some other area where libraries might exist. And usually the reason that this kind of situation happens is that, for instance, if I run ldconfig -p, this shows me the contents of the cache. So these are all the libraries that are currently cached and available to any operating system program or any other software with the appropriate physical location on the file system. And we can see there's quite a few items there. 1,191. It's a lot. I ran ldconfig -p, and what I did was I piped the output to the word count program. This lets me count the number of lines. We'll cover that a little bit later, but it's a very handy feature to consider. Now, within my shell, I can run the env command. It shows me my environment variables. If I run env and I grep for ld library path, I don't have anything configured because it's not part of my environment if I'm not a developer, if I'm not perhaps installing software. However, it is possible that when you're installing third-party applications, and I've seen this in my production support experience, where you have to install some software, but the shared libraries that it's referencing and the ones that it's needed are not in the standard locations like /lib or /lib64. So what I can do is I can change the library path and add these other directories as needed, and then just export that variable. It's just a shell variable like any other. Once that variable's been exported, then it becomes available for other programs to use. And we can see what that export command might look like. I've got some existing library paths, and maybe I've got some additional ones in my home directory, so I can export this, and now those will be within my search path when shared libraries are needed by software. All right, so these are some of the commands that we looked at. The locating the dynamic shared libraries, looking at the config files, looking at the config directory, and we also touched on the ld library path. All right, so the next section that we have is getting into Debian package management. So I'll see you in 102.4 in just a little bit. Thank you.